I must thank let me read my glasses, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hyderabad University, Professor Ramakrishna Ramaswamy, and the head of the center. Professor, the chair, you are not the chairman of the. Okay. Okay. The rotating. See, this is a terrible thing, that power rotates. That is democracy for you. You can't hold on to it. And, okay. So we have, I want to thank my friend Tutun. Is that easy? That does not rotate. Friendship stays. And I'm so glad that this annual lecture has been instituted in the memory of late Professor Sujit Mukherjee, and I do not have to say why. We all know by this time why. I really consider it a great honor indeed to be the first one to offer my homage to the memories of Sujit, a revered scholar of comparative literature. That's what I think he is. Whether he's ever taught comparative literature or not is irrelevant. And a pathfinder in the world of translation studies in India. Also a dear friend. As practitioners of comparative literature in India, we are infinitely grateful to him for what he's done for comparative Indian literature. Buddhadev Bose had pioneered comparative literature studies as an academic discipline in India, freeing us from our colonial short-sightedness by pushing back the boundaries of world literature beyond English literature. Sujit Mukherjee, on the other hand, was among the handful of scholars who, in order to stretch our identities beyond our regions, believed in the necessity of literary translations, international literary translations. That translation can create a sense of oneness, overcoming the barriers of multilingualism. It can push back the narrow boundaries of regional identities and open up a broad sense of Indianness within us. This is something some of us have been writing for years, but it's only in the last few years that the idea has caught on commercially, and English language publishers in India are seriously entering the translation market. It's not an easy market. I don't know how commercially viable it is, but morally extremely important for all of us to know ourselves as Indians. We must remember when Sujit Mukherjee was writing on translating Indian literature for Indians, and this is where he is a class by himself, because we are all the time trying to present ourselves to readership outside India, but that is not what was Sujit's concern. He wanted Indians to know India. There was no such things as departments of translation studies in our universities, not even in the present shape in the university outside India. It makes me truly happy to see the well-deserved recognition that this university has given to Sujit Mukherjee, to his path-breaking work, honoring his invaluable achievements. It's a great pity that Professor Meenakshi Mukherjee is no more with us to share this moment. But I am indeed very happy to see Rohini with us here today. I'm so happy that you're here, Rohini, and not elsewhere doing something else. Because this generation is never in one place. This generation is, see, I am in Calcutta. No. We also move about. I feel especially privileged to be the one to inaugurate this prestigious memorial lecture, Because apart from translation and comparative literature, Professor Sujit Mukherjee and I shared one more specific area of literary interest. Both of us had worked on Tagore's reception in an impact upon Western literary world, the literary world of Europe and the United States. And both of us had dealt with Tagore's translations. Not very many people have dealt with Tagore's reception outside India. And this was, when we were working on it, this was the early 60s, late 50s and early 60s, because my PhD was finished in 63 and his book came out in 64. And we did not know who was doing what. We didn't know each other. One another's work was completely unknown to us. We were using the same materials we're doing, thinking on very similar lines, and unknown to one another. I mean, really, it really shows that we were meant to be friends, because amazing coincidence that we looked at the same materials and roughly came to the same conclusions at different universities. And those days, comparative literature was not accepted as a serious discipline in British universities, and the colonized mind of Indian academia blindly followed suit. This discipline was derided as a newfangled American idea by a number of respected scholars in English literature in our country, who were not aware of the rich traditions of French and German streams of comparative literature at that time. However, neither Sujit Mukherjee nor Meenakshi Mukherjee nor me, we could not be dissuaded by these adverse criticisms. We held on to the basic idea of comparative literature as the key to studying Indian literature. Indian literatures. They had brought out a magazine called Vagat in the late 70s from Delhi, which really was a magazine on comparative literature, on Indian literature and literature abroad. It's a fabulous magazine. I think it lived for about 7-8 years, and it's something that holds a very important place in the history of comparative literature in India. Translation is the primary tool of recognizing Indianness in this wonderfully rich, multilingual motherland of ours. Clearly, Indian literature shows its true face only through the mirror of translations. When we find our own lives reflected in another's mother tongue, it's like finding your own head on someone else's shoulder. Only translation can achieve this magic. It can give us our own Indian identity, rising above the regional. Not a Bengali, a Telugu, or a Marathi writer, but through translation you can recognize me as a contemporary Indian writer. This is what Sujit was trying to do, and he wanted to have this concept of Indo-English writing, which was going to be a body of writing from different language areas, literature translated into English, as opposed to Indo-Anglian writing, which is Indian literature written in English as original. This is Indian literature in the original languages, but translated into English. And that body of literature would naturally, if properly done, would be much larger, much richer and varied. But that hasn't happened as yet. We only hope it will. without translation, we can't write histories of any Indian literature. Both in his book, Translation as Discovery and Translation as Recovery, if you notice, he is talking about this, that no regional language literature can stand on its own without taking into account the translated material that exists, that has become like, that has built the tradition. And there's now I want to digress a little and travel back in time, like everybody is. I can too. And this is a bit, it's about Jab We Met. And I think it was in 1966. I was speaking at the University of Pune in the Department of English, invited by Professor Nagarajan, where I met my Meenakshi and her tall, handsome husband, who was teaching at Kharagvasla. We struck up an instant friendship, and it lasted. We shared many fond memories between us of both work and fun and family tales. And I must share one with you, which I told Tutun in Kolkata. In spring 1993, I was visiting Bellagio and on the Rockefeller Foundation Writing Fellowship, where Sujit and Mukherjee went soon after I left. I think in the following summer. When we met afterwards, it was autumn in the United States. Three of us were sitting on the grounds of some park, surrounded by heaps of colorful maple and oak leaves among tall naked trees. Sujit asked, were those English poems translations of your Bangla Kobita? Or did you write them in English? I couldn't understand what he was talking about. So I said, which poems? What are you talking about? So Meenakshi answered, the poems we found on the computer when we moved into your room in Villa Cerbelloni. And they were allotted the same suite. They used the same computer that I was given, and I had forgotten all about the poems, whatever. Kobi Mahashaya, you had forgotten to erase them when you left. That computer was public property. So are your poems now. And Sujit laughed and said something really, really nice after that. Said, we inherited your poems. It was so good to find them. So unexpectedly, it was a surprise welcome from you. So, I have never forgotten that moment. Some moments in life become permanent in memory, and this was one of those. But with the surprise welcome, they must have found all my private correspondence as well. Comes back the surprise. Anyway, those days I was not very, I couldn't think of erasing. I was just learning how to use them. I mean, really, it was. Now, Sujit, I found Sujit a veteran comparatist, a complete personality. We all know about his interests from cricket to English literature, to American literature, to Indian regional literatures, and his wonderful coinage. I'm so grateful to him for it, Indo-English literature. He wanted to bring all Indian regional literatures under a single umbrella of English translations. His way of solving the problems of multicultural India. Under this definition, he wanted it to be seen as a bunch of multiple literary experiences of the Indian people, combined into a single body of literature. Indo-English literature was multilingual India in English translation, as opposed to Indo-Anglian literature, which was Indian literature originally in English, one language literature. But this was going to be multilingual India in English. Completely different in its character, completely different in its value, and the history that each language literature carries is not comparable at all to the Indo-Anglian literature. History of that is not comparable. Finally, Sujit made a wonderful choice to put his dreams into reality and he moved over to hands-on service to Indian literature by producing his own translations, not only as a publisher or as a scholar, but also he became his own, he did his own translations, fabulous translations, a hard-working man he was. And he did whatever he believed in. He actually put it into practice, something that we scholars don't do. We theorize, then we don't put it into practice. But he did. And he had shown the younger scholars a direct way to serve their country, their people, their mother tongues. You can achieve all this by becoming a capable, dedicated translator of your own regional language literature. That is multilingual India's crying need today. Competent, dedicated translators, genuinely interested in serving your mother tongue. But we all know you can't do that without good salary. It has to be paid for. Free service, the days of that. But when he was writing, he was thinking of voluntary service. We can't think of that. There has to be proper way of funding good translations. Without funding, it can't function. It can't work. So he's talking about serving your mother tongue and saving. This is what I think is saving our future generations from intellectual as well as emotional bankruptcy. Sujit writes, there is no reason why more and more of our modern Indian writing should not become available in English. Its fulfillment is possible only through voluntary labor and private enterprise, especially of persons who make a living in India out of the English language. This is a very, very important thing to say. Who make a living in India out of the English language. Who are these people? English teachers, English language journalists, Indo-Anglian writers, practically anybody with a literary sense and competence in English. And of course, the English language publishers in India can all contribute in little and large measure towards this. Each has in his possession an Indian language whose literary achievements have yet to be exposed to the rest of India. This is what he felt, that he had in his possession an Indian language whose literary achievements had to be exposed to the rest of India. And he wanted the next generation to feel like that, to think like that, to feel the need for it. What makes Sujit very special to me is his conscious choice of readership for the translations. And also, he wanted Indians to get to know one another better, more closely, more clearly, to strengthen the concept of India and Indianness, not to quench the curiosity of the Western readership, nor to earn dollars. I adore his trust in the goodwill of people. But most of the possible volunteers who make a living by using English language in India at the moment are busy producing that one popular novel in English language which will bring about an astronomical change in their bank account. At the same time, make them a part of world literature. They believe only those who waste their time in translating others have nothing of their own to contribute to the world. I'm sorry to say this, that capable writers are moving over to creating, most of the younger people I know, each one has a plan, each one is writing a novel of hers or his own. No one is thinking of translating somebody else. And I don't know how useful that is for Indian literature in future. Those who want to translate Indian regional literature into English mostly want to do it specifically for the Western readership, with notes and textual changes, using terms familiar to the Western culture, leaving out sections, skipping problems, to avoid cultural complexities. And as a matter of fact, diasporic Indian writing in English has produced outside India show some of these qualities pretty clearly. But days are changing, attitudes are changing. Different time. We can wait and expect a different time to come soon. Quite unaware of his own innocence, how easily Sujit melts down the hard-to-cross barriers between our regional languages. He writes, I quote, "Until such time, some Indian language can act in this capacity, English will continue to act as a link between those who read one Indian language and those who write in another." Whenever we think of multiplicity of languages, we get worried and we can't see an end to it. But look at the way Sujit looked at it. I write in one language, you read in another. As simple as that. And all we need, who do we need? We need a translator to bring us together. As a matter of fact, no one is unilingual in India. Everybody, all of us in the cities know at least 3 languages. And in the villages, they know at least 3 dialects. Everyone is multilingual really. But when it comes to reading, that's a different story. Speaking is one thing, reading is another. How beautifully Sujit ignored the inaccessibility that weakens us and enhanced the commonality that gives us power. Just by saying, you write in one, I read in another. How he simplified the differences between neighboring languages. Now, what do I do? What do we do with the translator who joins us in happy bonding? This morning I was talking to Modi, and we were talking about this, and I said that once I was in Hyderabad, Telugu University in Hyderabad, and in the library I went to see the Bengali section translated into Telugu, and I saw beautifully bound books saying Sharad Babu, Sharad Babu. And then I looked for Rabindranath. I couldn't. Then I saw Tagore, Tagore. So Tagore has probably come through English, and Sharad Chandra came directly from Bangla. So he's become Sharad Babu. like Chandrababu. And Tagore remains Tagore. So when I was saying that, and then I also remembered that in Pune, I have a very good friend whose house I was visiting, Gujaratis. And a young man came and his name was Sharat Chandra. I said, oh, what a lovely name. Do you know whose name that is? He said, yes. Sharat Chandra was the name of an old Gujarati writer. So there you've got translation. What translation can do? It can change. I mean, this is amazing when you read someone in your own mother tongue. You can see it. And that young man was then about, say, 25, 26, not a baby. Anyway, so now he knows who Sharat Chandra was. But then there's another story. Another friend of ours, T.N. Krishnan, translation cannot always do good. It can also harm you. T.N. Krishnan is from Kerala. So he went to, when we were at Harvard and MIT, and he was going to MIT, and he used to come, Shukamoy Chakraborty, Professor Ramaswamy's father-in-law, used to live across the street, and he and Amartya Sen were classmates and very close friends. And we lived across the street, and T.N. Krishnan used to come and have endless meals at Shukamoy's place. Not so much at mine because I was learning to cook. And Shukamoy's wife was a good cook, so he knew where to go. And after a few months, he said, you know what? You are the only wonderful Bengali woman I've met. Oh, that's bad. Why? Because when I spent 2 years in Statistical Institute in Kolkata, I didn't meet any Bengali woman. My father told me not to meet them. Why? Because he had read Sharat Chandra. Every Bengali woman is a Dushcharitra. Why? They break rules. So I don't know whether it's to be used as a story of feminism or a story of translation or both. But that is what Sharat Chandra translation can do for you. Anyway. Translators can save our future generations from a great emptiness, that of separation and loss, by reconnecting them to our past and present realities. They carried through our traditional literatures in our mother tongues. Our younger generations know nothing other than the newest and strongest literary products that forcefully flow down to them through English language. Go to any bookstore and you'll find what the young reader's choices are, the preferences are. It spoils the taste, literary taste in them. Oh, by the way, Minnie, I read your thing this morning. I'm so glad you have said so many important things in your interview about translations with Indian Express. I think it's it is what I had already. Anyone who loves Indian literature would feel like that. So, mother tongue is fast going out of the life of urban youth because there's no use for it for enhancing your career. More than a decade has passed since the Nimrana Tamasha, and Indian writing in English has truly flourished beyond all expectation. Concomitantly, we are also more aware of our lack of translated material to represent contemporary India in English. But times are changing. the goddess of translation has given a nod. Sujit's dreams may not fall far behind. Indian literature in translation at long last has begun to make a space for itself on the bookstore shelves, and young, enthusiastic, dedicated and competent translators have started to appear on our literary horizon. I always like to remember something that Sujit Mukherjee had once pointed out masterfully. He had said that Western readers of Indian literature have a greater advantage over us, because while we in India deal with the complex vision of an externally fragmented, linguistically separated, inner oneness of Indian literatures, those coming from outside have a simple vision of the wholeness of Indian literature, since everything is presented before them on the platter of one single language, usually their own. Hence, through translations, they can have a general panoramic view of Indian literature, not Tamil, Telugu, Marathi like that, because they are not often aware. They can have a general panoramic view of Indian literature by wiping out the linguistic differences and by imposing an artificial unity. The translations create a background of objectivity and introduce a certain distance, emphasizing the underlying oneness in forms, themes, idioms, imagery, and metaphors, bringing to light the unity of Indian literary experience, the historical as well as the sentimental journey, intellectual and cultural attitudes, just as staining the slide helps to identify the basic patterns under a microscope. Similarly, translating into one language helps the foreigner grasp the basic patterns of the Indian experience. I think it's a beautiful thing that Sujit had said, and we should remember, not only for foreigners, but for our children. Within India as well, we would enormously benefit from this approach. If more translated material from the regional literatures were made available in English, it would be certainly enriching for the next generation. Indian literature in translation is shamefully invisible. I leave out these things. When I was weeping over why do we have Latin American, Central European, Middle Eastern literatures in translation, which are new literatures. I mean, we are not talking about the French and Russian translation empires, but why can't we do whatever could be done in Latin America, Central Europe and Middle East? Can't. Why? Well, you know, in 1997, in 1997, in Nehru Center in London, Arundhati Roy's book, I was fortunate to inaugurate that book in Nehru Center. And I was talking to her and I said, so when are the translations coming out? She said, oh, okay, 11 languages. So I said, what? Hindi? Oh, no, not Indian languages, 11 European languages. So I said, why not in India? She said, but there is no professionalism. Malayalam translations, yes, because I can check. But the other languages I wouldn't be able to check. And at that time, I was annoyed. Then I came home and thought, and I was not annoyed anymore. I can understand. Because we do badly need professional ethics and training in translation in the regional languages. So she said, I wouldn't know what is being translated into what in the regional language. I wouldn't know. Now, we ourselves, most of us, we know European literature, we do not know Indian literature. We don't know the great writers in our neighboring languages in India. We don't. Teaching comparative literature, yes, we do, but outside that, why not? Because there is no training in translation, no culture of translation in our Indian way of thinking. Do they translate it? Okay, you go to Sanskrit. Look at the old days, how eagerly everybody translated everybody, but nowadays things have changed so much. We are happy with foreign literature, and we are happy with our modern Indian literatures in English. We are not interested. You know what? This global youth, what is there? There's no global youth. Because there is somehow in the following generations, they don't read, not only the older ones, but even the present writers in the mother tongue, they don't know their mother tongues. And the next generation won't even know the names. Now they hear the names, the next generation won't even hear the names. You know why I feel this way? Because in the literary festivals that are taking place everywhere in India now, all the literary festivals concentrate on all the changes are in English. And the basic ways of selection is changed. Now, if you go, the ones that I've gone to, several, even in Kolkata, the attention goes basically to the English language discussions, and how are they advertised? How are they sold? You know what it's like. Like there are no interpreters, of course, and because who are the writers who are invited? They invite young people who write in English. Of course, there are no interpreters and no translators available. It's not like Europe. So the local writers, the regional writers, they step out. They feel awkward because they can't speak in English. They can't continue the conversation. And it has happened several times, and the result has been like this. They slowly recede into the back space by not being even invited. You see the names of young aspiring Indian writers in English. They are replacing established elderly regional language writers in the festivals, which I think is an extremely dangerous trend, because we think India is becoming more and more aware of literatures. We are not thinking about which literatures, which languages. You will notice that if you look at the list, you will see that the elderly writers, established writers in regional languages, they are put together some space, given some space sometimes, but mostly they are not. In the recent Calcutta thing I saw, wonderful thing was in Bangalore. They had sessions with Kannada, but it doesn't really happen so much in Jaipur. It doesn't happen in Kolkata, and even in the Calcutta Book Fair Festival, they also had a small. It was mainly people writing in English. if I hadn't, I think if I, just because I teach comparative literature, I'm also invited. But what if I hadn't taught in English? If I had only like my mother, in my mother tongue, I wouldn't be invited. Maybe Asha Devi would not have been invited. You know, it's like that. It's very, 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 very dangerous and frightening the way we are losing self-confidence in our regional languages. Everybody wants to be smart and global. You know, you can't be global without being rooted in your own space first. Your passport tells you who you are. It doesn't say global. It says Indian. It gives you an address. And you have to know that is what you are. And your regional literature tells you that, who you are, and connects you with your past, with the excellence that you are missing. This is why we need translation. Anyway, there are 4 or 5 pages I don't feel like reading, because doesn't matter. I'm so glad I'm here, and I'm so glad I can see many old friends I've met here today. I've seen Minnie, I've seen Priya. When I saw Priya, Priya was in her, first when I met her, she was in her 17 years old, and then I saw her when she was still in her, not even in her 30s. And now we are all of the same age almost. One. That's my way of not telling my age. Anyway, I want to say something. I have published this book of translations in Bangla. It's called Upamahadesher Golpo, Stories of the Subcontinent. It's from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and West Bengal, and India. But translated only from English. Because the translations in English were there, this book was possible. Because there are English translations of all these stories from the subcontinent, this book is possible in Bangla. And my Bengali readers can read it. And this is what I wanted to say. These are for you. Thank you very much, Tutun, and thank you.
Thank you for a fascinating talk and insights into a variety of things, including crying need for translators and the translated. I keep requesting our departments of Hindi and Telugu in particular to look at translations, although my interests are a little more to see that there are translators of science. But I think there's a need for translators in every field.
Yes,
okay.
a book release. We'll have a small book release.
Yeah. Actually, one of the impetuses for this particular visit of yours was the translation that Tutun has done of your book in the series, the OUP series, I think it is.
Yes.
Yes. And,
I'm very happy. My first book in translation. You have to be 76 before your first book in translation.
And it's my pleasure to.
My first book came out when I was 21. And I've been writing ever since in Bangla.
Okay, and well, it's now my turn to cut the ribbon. Yes. Deepa? So here it is. Sheet Sahasik Hemantulok.
Sheet Sahashi came out.
In Bengali? Once more in
Oh
Bengali.
God. Sheet Sahasik Hemantulok.
That's good.
It's better.
But Minnie, won't you come up? Minnie, it's your book. Come.
So these are the others in the series. there's a set of 6 just to advertise. One is Dweepa from Kannada, Mugavani Pillana Grovi from Telugu.
Can we request Professor Panikar to come take?
Why don't you read this? It's a rousing excerpt.
Who will the Telugu? You said? Come in the same thing. Vaadivasan from Tamil.
I need a copy of it. I'll buy it.
The Tamil one, and then, oh God, Malayalam.
Just read the English, sir. Just read the English.
You know the first name should be in English.
Requiem
Next
for the
time you put the
Living.
Bengali
They
underneath.
deliberately put in the Indian, because I want to privilege the Indian title.
So idealistic.
Sachin,
Which one? The Marathi one?
Professor Sachin, one thing? Please receive this book. This is from Marathi.
Vijay,
You are continuing to us.
Vijay, at least we meet here.
Thank you.
And take the time.
That's
I
it.
get to keep the time.
Receiving it for the third time.
Oh, that's why I couldn't see. I was wearing my reading glasses.
Your book. Adventures of a Brahmin Priest.
Can we request Rohini to please come and receive this book?
1857. My travels in the 1857 rebellion.
Cover. Very nice cover.
It's the author's handwriting.
Didn't Vrinda Pandey do a translation? Okay,